Hello, Green Team. We are in part 5 of 6 on our series of navigating a contract to closing. We are so close to the end. We're so close to our commission check and reaping all the rewards and being done with this crazy process for this specific property. And today we're going to go over executing the closing process. So the physical closing process is what we're working on today. We've got 5 steps. First, we're going to schedule the closing. Second, we're going to request earnest money. Third, we're going to conduct the final walkthrough. And then we're going to get our closing gifts and talk about actually physically sitting at the closing table and what you're going to do. So let's start with scheduling a closing. This is pretty simple, like we've scheduled multiple things throughout. If I go back to our between contract and closing document, which we've been working through this whole time, you can see we've done item by item to get to this closing process. Including scheduling our inspections, depositing earnest money, our inspections, TRR period. We're all the way down here to schedule a closing time. So the way we do this is we talk to our buyers and sellers, and then we talk to the other agent, and we work at a time that works for everybody to do our closing. And once everybody's on board, we're going to call the title company and say, hey, any chance we've got something in the morning on that day? They're going to tell you your time options. You're going to have to probably go back to the buyer and seller and the other agent, say, hey, does this time work? We'll tentatively schedule it. Does this time work? Great. Got it confirmed. Do this as early on as you can. And by early on as you can, I mean basically when the TRR is done and agreed to. Once repairs get agreed to, or no repairs get agreed to, we want to go ahead and schedule the closing. Worst case scenario, everything falls apart. We'll have to cancel this closing time, but at least we'll get it on the books in a time that's convenient for everybody early on before all those time slots start filling up. So my recommendation is to do this right after the TRR gets agreed to by both parties. So once we got closing scheduled, we are going to work towards that closing. So we're going to request our earnest money. Remember, in this specific scenario, we have put our earnest money with Sherry at Weichert Realtor Centennial. So we need to send our earnest money form to Sherry that we are ready to request it. What she's going to do is write a check for us based off our earnest money form that we can pick up on our closing day and take to the title company with us. What we're going to put in our email to her is the date and time of closing, so she knows when it needs to be ready by and who to make the check out to. Just a reminder, the earnest money form looks, let me go back real quick to our earnest money form. It looks just like this, and it's going to say on it where it's being held and who's holding it, but it's not going to say what title company the earnest money needs to go to. Okay, so unless it's being held down here by the escrow agent, which is great, the escrow agent would be the one that's holding the money, and so we wouldn't have to request it because it's just going to be sitting there at closing. Otherwise, either the selling side or the listing side is going to be requesting it from a real estate company, and they will be taking a physical check to closing for the earnest money. In this case, it'd be $8,000, and it's going to be listed in our settlement statement that it's planned to be there at closing. So my email to Sherry needs to have who we're making the check out to, which is which title company we're making it out to. In this case, it's Chicago Title Norman. All we need to put for any Chicago title is make it out to Chicago Title. Boom, I've got my earnest money requested. I want to do this at least a week before closing to give Sherry plenty of time to get it set up, and she's going to have it ready for me on the day of my closing. Okay, so now that I've got my earnest money requested, I need to get my final walkthrough set up. So I'm going to ask my buyers what's a good time for final walkthrough. In my experience, the best time to do this is the night before closing, maybe the afternoon before closing. It gives you a little bit of time to get stuff corrected. Maybe even 2 nights before closing, as long as all the repairs have been done and the sellers have moved out. Basically, you want to make sure the house is in the exact condition that your buyers are expecting to get it at closing. And here's your job at the final walkthrough. First off, we're going to schedule it through showing time. We're going to schedule it as a walkthrough through showing time. We talked about that a couple of videos ago, but just a reminder, you will just go to the MLS. You'll click down here that you want to schedule a showing. It's going to say this one's already pending, and it's going to say, do you want to set it up as a walkthrough appraisal? We're going to say yes. We're going to set it up as a walkthrough. So once I do that, I've got it scheduled. When I get to the final walkthrough, I'm going to have the TRR with me probably on my phone or whatever. And I'm going to check so I can check through those repair items that were supposed to be done, that we've already verified, gotten receipts and photos of, but just so I can check through them. The other things I want to check is the house should be in the same condition that the buyers walked through it originally when they made the decision that they wanted to buy the house. This is part of the contract that the house is getting delivered. Obviously, furniture will be moved out, the appliances will be moved out that are supposed to be moved out. So it's going to look a little bit different, but the actual condition of the real estate should be the exact same that the buyer saw when they originally walked through the property. If it's the exact same as when the buyers walked through the property, you're all good. The other thing I want to check, and a good reason to have the contract with you on your phone or mobile device or whatever, is I want to check out the inclusions and exclusions. So maybe the refrigerator's supposed to stay, or the stove is not supposed to stay, or there's a trampoline in the backyard, whatever it is. This is a great time to have that contract. So if the buyer say, wait a second, wasn't this item X supposed to still be here? Oh, you know what? Let me check. No, it was not. It was actually not part of the contract. Here you go. You can see it. So we can show it to them, explain it, and make sure everyone's on the same page. And if we did this a couple days before, and maybe the sellers took something they weren't supposed to, maybe they took a TV off one of the walls. This would be great because we have a couple days to tell them, and maybe they can get it back to the property before closing, and nobody's got a bunch of hurt feelings, and we don't have to hold up closing based off of a TV. So this is your job at the final walkthrough. Your job is to be thorough, make sure the property is in the same condition, and all the repairs and inclusions and exclusions have been conducted properly. That's a realtor's job at the final walkthrough. Once you've conducted the final walkthrough, and probably way before this, you would have already set up your closing gifts. So a good time to start working on your closing gifts, again, is right around that time that the TRR is agreed to, or maybe you want to wait till you hear the clear to close from the financing side of stuff. Either of those would be fine. But here are my recommendations on closing gifts. And I think closing gifts are really important because they have an opportunity to up a relationship to the next level with your buyer or seller that you're working with. So first off, I'd say don't wait until the last minute. Don't go buy the closing gift the night before closing, because it's going to make your gift a lot less personal, and you're probably going to end up with a gift card. So please try to give yourself some time, really think about it and make them personal. We've got a whole video series on Giftology, which is a great program that I highly recommend to look into. But make them personal gifts that show you were listening to them during this whole process while you were showing them 20 houses, or while you're listing their property, and you understand maybe they're really involved with their kids or their pets or something they're really passionate about. Show them that you listen, that you care, that you're going the next level, and you're going to make your closing gift personal to them. It's not just a Chili's gift card that you get every single closing for people, so that you don't have to really think about it. Make it a personal gift. And then we usually want to give this to them either right at the closing table or after closing. We're going to give it to them. Don't give these closing gifts to people before closing. In general, it's just not a good idea. Who knows if it's going to get delayed, what kind of problems you're going to run into. So a good rule of thumb is maybe right after they've signed at closing and everyone's sitting there waiting on funding. It's a good time in the lobby or at the closing table to hand over the gift, and maybe even take some photos or something like that. Or you could bring it by their house later that day while they're moving in. It's also a good time to do it. So that's closing gifts. Highly, highly recommend them. And I recommend being good at them because that can make a big difference in those relationships that you're going to develop with these people. And then finally, we're going to talk about actually sitting at the closing table. So, okay, I got closing set up. It's my first ever closing. I got to show up. What do I do? Well, here's a couple things you need to do. First off, you need to make sure you told your buyers, if you're on the buyer side, that they need to have their IDs with them, their photo IDs with them, and a cashier's check for their amount they're supposed to bring to closing. If you're on the seller side, you need to make sure they have the keys, the garage door openers, and any other stuff associated with the property that the buyer's going to need to operate the property. So on either side, that's what I need to have with me. When I get to the title office, I'm going to let the front desk know, hey, the buyers are here for And I mean, either going to give the address or the last name. Title companies usually work off last names of the buyers and sellers. So you can give the last name, or you can just give the address and maybe the closer's name. So make sure you have that info with you, and let the front desk know that you're there. They're going to call you in at some point to the office. In general, most of our closings in the state of Oklahoma kind of happen where the buyers go in, they do their signings, and then the sellers go in and do their signing while the funding is being processed on the buyer side. It may be reversed. It happens in either order. However, very, very, very rarely are the buyers and sellers in the same room at the same time, almost never. So you'll have your own separate time that you're in there with your clients, either the buyers or the sellers, to do your signing. When you walk in the room, make sure you sit at the end of the table. The buyers or sellers will sit across from the escrow officer, and you will sit off to the end of the table. Your job's really simple at this closing. First off, listen to the escrow officer as they go through the forms, because they're going to say some stuff that is really valuable information to you for you to know as a realtor. Listen to them, heck, even take notes, because you're going to learn some really good info as they're going through all the documents that they have to go through that will help you explain to your future clients what to expect and make you a better realtor. Second, this is the first time that the escrow officer is probably ever meeting these buyers and sellers, and maybe the last time they'll ever talk to them again. So their conversation, the escrow officer needs help from you. You should have the relationship developed with the buyers or sellers and be able to make this a much more comfortable situation. Escrow officers will appreciate you in your role as a realtor if you can keep the small conversation going without being too distracting to where the buyers and sellers aren't doing their signing that they're supposed to be doing. But your job's kind of to make the whole situation comfortable for everybody. We want to keep the buyers and sellers comfortable because they're signing some really big documents, and they are having to kind of trust everybody in the room. So you want to keep that feeling of trust and comfort going through the buyers and sellers also. And that's kind of your job and your role in this. You really don't have to sign. Very rarely do you have to sign anything. Usually don't have to answer many questions. Your job's just to be there and to make the situation stay fluid. If you can do that, you will develop some good friendships with escrow officers, and they can be a huge help to you when you have questions or need something special done. So you want to keep those escrow officers happy, and you want the buyers and sellers to feel like you know what you're doing, even at this process when you're actually closing the property. So this is the closing process. Once everybody signs, the escrow officer will take the paperwork, they will send it off for funding if there's a mortgage associated with the transaction, and they will come back at some point and say that the transaction's been funded. They'll hand everybody their folders. The keys and the garage door openers will get transferred from the listing agent to the buyer's agent, and the closing will be over. Everyone will shake hands. Sometimes they'll talk a little bit. And you will take your commission check back to the office, and then we'll go through what you have to do once you get to the office, because you've got a commission check from the escrow company, but it's made out to Weichert Realtor Centennial, not to you. So you need to know the steps that get a check from Weichert Realtor Centennial made out to you, because that's kind of the important part of this whole process. We'll deal with that in the next section.